Hello everyone, I am Dr. John Watson, and I am the narrator tonight. I have had the distinct privilege of accompanying my extraordinary friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, on countless adventures through the labyrinthine alleys and gaslit drawing rooms of London. Many of these tales remain etched in my memory with an intensity that time cannot diminish, but few possessed the peculiar, subtle horror and intellectual challenge of the one I am about to recount. It was a case where the most innocuous detail, a simple sound, held the key to a truly sinister truth, weaving a tapestry of deceit that even I, with my medical background and years of observation, struggled to unravel. Prepare yourselves, for the shadows of late Victorian London hold secrets far darker than the fog that often blankets its streets. Now, let's start with the first chapter of The Secret of the Creaking Floorboard. Chapter 1. The Call in the Fog. The year was 1891, and a particularly pervasive November fog had settled over London, muffling the usual clamour of hansom cabs and the distant cries of street vendors into a spectral whisper. I sat by the fireplace at 221B Baker Street, the warmth of the roaring coals a welcome antidote to the persistent chill that seeped in through the very bricks of our dwelling. My current literary endeavour, a treatise on the surgical applications of modern antiseptics, lay open but largely unread upon my lap. Holmes, as was his wont, was immersed in a forensic chemistry experiment of questionable aroma, the acrid temps of which occasionally permeated the otherwise comfortable confines of our sitting-room. He hummed a discordant melody, a clear sign of deep concentration, and I knew better than to disturb his intellectual reverie. Our evening, however, was destined not to remain in such tranquil academic pursuits. A sharp, insistent rap upon our door broke the spell, a sound muffled by the dense fog but still carrying an urgency that suggested no mere social call. Mrs. Hudson, with a sigh of weary resignation, soon ushered in a visitor. She was a woman of a certain elegance, though her attire, a fashionable velvet cloak and hat, was now dishevelled, and her face, ordinarily striking, was blotched with tears and etched with a profound distress that wrung a sympathetic pang from my own breast. Her name, she introduced herself in a tremulous voice, was Mrs. Eugenia Blackwood. "Mr. Holmes," she began, her voice quivering despite a valiant attempt at composure, I have heard of your extraordinary abilities. My husband, Arthur, he is dead." Holmes, ever the pragmatist, merely raised an eyebrow, laying aside his noxious flask. "My condolences, madam. A sudden illness. They say it was his heart," she choked out, fumbling for a handkerchief. "But I know it was not. Arthur was a man of robust health. For all his scholarly pursuits, there is something profoundly wrong, Mr. Holmes, something terribly, terribly wrong." She dabbed at her eyes, taking a deep, shuddering breath. "He was an antiquarian, you see, a collector of rare manuscripts and ancient artifacts. His study, a veritable sanctuary of history, was where he spent most of his waking hours. This morning, his butler, Giles, found him there, slumped over his desk, lifeless. I offered her a glass of sherry, which she accepted with a grateful nod, her hands trembling as she brought it to her lips. "The police," she continued, finding a modicum of strength in the amber liquid, "they are thorough, I suppose, but they see only what is on the surface. They spoke of natural causes, of an old man's heart finally giving out, but they do not know Arthur. They do not know our home." Holmes leaned forward, his hawk-like gaze fixed upon her. "And what, pray tell, is it about your home, Mrs. Blackwood, that leads you to believe otherwise?" Her eyes, still red-rimmed, darted about our room, as if seeking solace in its familiar disorder. "It is the floorboard, Mr. Holmes. In Arthur's study, there is one particular floorboard, just by the door, that has always creaked, a most pronounced and irritating groan, every single time one steps upon it. A feature of the house, Giles would often lament, that no amount of repair or padding could ever truly silence. Yet, when I rushed to the study this morning, when I saw Arthur, there was no creak, not a sound. The floorboard was utterly, unnaturally silent." She looked directly at Holmes, her plea raw and desperate. "It was as if someone had silenced it. And that, Mr. Holmes, is why I believe my husband was murdered." A faint flicker of interest, like a spark igniting in the depths of a dark cave, appeared in Holmes's usually impassive eyes. A creaking floorboard, silenced, in the room of a man found dead. It was a detail so minute, so seemingly insignificant, yet imbued with a potential for profound revelation that only Sherlock Holmes could truly appreciate. He picked up his pipe, his gaze drifting towards the window, where the pea-soup fog pressed against the pane like a ghostly curtain. "Indeed, Mrs. Blackwood," he murmured, a low, thoughtful tone in his voice. "A most interesting detail. Pray tell, your address." The lady, relieved to have found a receptive ear, quickly supplied the details of her Belgravia residence. Holmes nodded, a plan already formulating in his formidable mind. "Very well, madame. Dr. Watson and I shall accompany you forthwith. We shall see what this silent sentinel has to say about the late Mr. Blackwood's untimely demise." I felt a familiar thrill course through me. The mundane had once again given way to the mysterious, and the quiet academic evening had dissolved into the promise of adventure. As Mrs. Blackwood rose, a fragile hope now mingling with her grief, I caught Holmes's eye. He gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. The game, as he might say, was afoot. But what game, and what secrets lay beneath the unnaturally silent floorboards of the Blackwood residence? Only the depths of London's shrouded night held the answer. Chapter 2. The Belgravia Abode. The journey through the fog-laden streets of Belgravia was a surreal experience. The gas lamps mere blurry halos in the impenetrable gloom, their light struggling to pierce the thick, yellowish vapor that swallowed all sound and shape. Our hansom cab, its wheels churning softly through the damp cobblestones, seemed to glide through a spectral landscape, until at last it deposited us before a grand, albeit sombre, townhouse. The residence of the late Mr. Arthur Blackwood exuded an air of quiet wealth. Its imposing facade of dark brick and ornate ironwork, now draped in the melancholy shroud of the London fog, a perfect setting for the unfolding drama. Mrs. Blackwood led us through a silently opened door, operated by a tall, impeccably dressed butler, whose impassive features betrayed nothing of the tragedy that had recently unfolded within these walls. This, I surmised, must be Giles, the very man who discovered the body. The interior of the house was a testament to refined Victorian taste, rich with polished mahogany, oriental rugs, and the hushed silence that only old money and fresh grief can bestow. The air was heavy with the scent of beeswax and something else, a faint, lingering aroma that I could not quite place, but which added to the oppressive atmosphere. "The study is this way, Mr. Holmes," Mrs. Blackwood whispered, her voice still raw with emotion. "The police have completed their initial inquiries, they say, but they permitted me to return." We followed her down a long corridor, lined with ancestral portraits, whose painted eyes seemed to follow our every move. The study, when we entered it, was a vast chamber, panelled in dark oak, its walls lined floor to ceiling with weighty tomes bound in leather and cloth. A large, formidable desk stood at its centre, still bearing the faint imprint of where Mr. Blackwood's body had rested. Dust motes danced in the sparse light, filtering through the tall, heavily curtained windows, lending an ethereal quality to the scene. The overall impression was one of scholarly endeavour, a life devoted to the quiet pursuit of knowledge, now brutally interrupted. Holmes, without a word, immediately moved towards the area Mrs. Blackwood had indicated, near the imposing double doors of the study. He knelt, drawing a small, powerful magnifying glass from his waistcoat pocket. His keen eyes, like those of a raptor scanning the landscape, meticulously examined the polished floorboards. I watched, fascinated as always, as he traced the lines of the wood grain, his fingers occasionally brushing lightly over the surface. There was no visible loose board, no obvious crick-inducing gap. The floor here seemed as solid and unyielding as the rest of the room. "Indeed," Madame Holmes finally murmured, his voice low and devoid of inflection. "The board appears perfectly sound now. One would never suspect it of harbouring such a notorious habit." Mrs. Blackwood wrung her hands. "But it did, Mr. Holmes. For 20 years it creaked. My husband himself would often make light of it, saying it was the voice of the house. How could it simply stop?" Holmes ignored her query, his attention fully absorbed by the floor. He pressed down on the floorboard with his thumb, then tapped it gently with his knuckle. The sound was a dull thud, not the hollow resonance of a loose plank. Yet, he continued to scrutinize, his head tilted slightly to one side. Then, with a subtle movement, he produced a small, silver penknife and carefully scraped at a minute imperfection in the wood. He brought the blade close to his eye. "Curious," he observed, more to himself than to us. "Very curious indeed. There is a faint indentation here, Dr. Watson, just at the joint, barely visible to the naked eye, and traces of something, a fine residue, almost like dust, but too uniform to be mere household grime, and, he paused, his voice dropping to a near whisper, the screws fastening this particular board appear to have been disturbed recently. The surrounding wood shows a slight splintering around the screw heads, inconsistent with long-term fixtures. Someone has, with considerable effort, resecured this particular floorboard. My mind reeled. If the board had been fixed, then the silence Mrs. Blackwood reported was not a natural occurrence. It was the result of deliberate action. The plot thickened, and the grim shadow of murder deepened. Just then, the butler, Giles, appeared in the doorway, his expression still a model of professional solemnity. "Might I offer Mr. Holmes and Dr. Watson some refreshment?" he inquired, his voice smooth and modulated. "Perhaps later," Giles Holmes replied, rising to his full height. His gaze, however, did not leave the floor. "For now, I have a question. You discovered Mr. Blackwood, did you not?" "I did," Sir Giles confirmed, without batting an eyelid. "At precisely 8 o'clock this morning, when I entered to draw the curtains and bring Mr. Blackwood his morning tea." "And when you entered, Giles, did you hear anything unusual?" Holmes pressed, his eyes now fixed on the butler. "Specifically, did you hear the floorboard by the door creak?" Giles paused for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to notice. "No, sir," he stated, his voice even. "It did not creak. I thought nothing of it at the time. Of course, one becomes accustomed to such things." Holmes nodded slowly, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips, a smile that spoke volumes of new information catalogued and analyzed. "Indeed, and before that, Giles, the night before Mr. Blackwood's passing, did you hear anything that might be out of the ordinary?" The butler's eyes flickered, just barely, towards Mrs. Blackwood, who was still standing by the desk, her grief a palpable presence. "No, sir," he reiterated firmly. "The house was quiet, as always. Mr. Blackwood retired to his study after supper, as was his custom. I locked up the premises at 11, and all was in order." Holmes thanked him, his gaze returning once more to the now fixed floorboard. The faint indentation, the recent disturbance of the screws, the fine residue, these details now screamed of deliberate concealment. But by whom and why? Mrs. Blackwood, still lost in her sorrow, suddenly spoke up, her voice fragile. "Arthur was working on something important, Mr. Holmes, a rare manuscript. He was quite consumed by it in his last days, often staying in his study late into the night. He mentioned it contained secrets, secrets." The word hung in the air, thick and heavy, like the fog outside. Holmes's eyes narrowed, now no longer solely focused on the floor, but on the broader canvas of the late antiquarian's life. The silent floorboard, the secretive manuscript, two seemingly disparate threads, now began to weave themselves into a tapestry of deeper intrigue. But who would go to such lengths to silence a mere board, and what deeper crime lay hidden beneath this meticulously restored surface? The answers, I knew, would demand every ounce of Holmes's prodigious intellect. Chapter 3. The Silent Witness. Holmes, with a swift, almost predatory grace, rose from his kneeling position, his eyes sweeping over the study with renewed intensity. The brief exchange with Giles, though outwardly innocuous, had clearly provided him with a new angle of attack. He now moved with purpose, circling the room, his magnifying glass, a relentless third eye, scrutinizing every shadow, every surface. I followed, accustomed to his methods, knowing that silence and keen observation were the prerequisites for any significant discovery. The study, once merely a repository of books, now seemed to transform under Holmes's gaze into a canvas bearing invisible strokes of a hidden narrative. He examined the desk where Mr. Blackwood had died, noting the precise arrangement of pens, the type of ink used, the lack of any significant struggle. He even sniffed at an open book, a heavy tome bound in ancient leather, its pages filled with elegant, faded script. He then turned his attention to the floor once more, not just the particular board, but the entire vicinity. "Watson," Holmes finally broke the silence, his voice barely a whisper. "Observe these faint scratches here, almost imperceptible against the dark wood grain. They radiate outwards from where our silent sentinel once stood. They are not old marks, judging by the sharpness of their edges. Someone, I venture, dragged something heavy across this spot, likely in the process of replacing the floorboard." I knelt to examine the marks, indeed so subtle as to be almost invisible without specific direction. They were not deep gouges, but rather fine, almost hair-thin lines, suggesting the object was weighty but not exceptionally rough. My mind immediately conjured images of the killer, furtively dragging tools or perhaps the board itself, anxious to obliterate any trace of their activity. Holmes then pointed to another detail, even more minute, and here, Dr. Watson, wedged ever so carefully within the hairline crack between this board and its neighbor, a fragment no larger than a pinhead. What do you make of it? I leaned in close, my breath held. With the aid of Holmes's lens, I could discern a tiny, almost translucent sliver of material. It possessed a faint yellowish hue and a peculiar, polished translucence. It was clearly not wood. It's not wood, Holmes. Perhaps a shard of glass, or some kind of synthetic material. Holmes shook his head, a glint of triumph in his eyes. Neither, my dear Watson. Note the warmth of its color, the minute striations visible under the lens, the almost imperceptible warmth it transmits. It is, I believe, a fragment of amber, polished amber, to be precise, and a rather distinctive shade at that. Amber. The word hung in the air, an incongruous detail in a Victorian study. What connection could a piece of polished amber have to a man's death and a silent floorboard? My mind raced, trying to link it to some implement, some ornament, some clue, but no clear connection presented itself. Holmes then shifted his attention to the bookshelves. He ran his fingers along the spines of various books, his movements methodical and deliberate. Mr. Blackwood was an antiquarian, Mrs. Blackwood stated, a man of order, one would assume, particularly with such valuable texts. Yet, observe the arrangement here. These 3 volumes of medieval church history, all first editions, are out of sequence, and this one, he plucked a thin, unassuming volume from a crowded shelf. Its title in Latin has been replaced upside down. A minor detail, perhaps, but quite out of character for a fastidious scholar. Mrs. Blackwood, who had been watching Holmes with a mixture of awe and trepidation, now spoke. Arthur was indeed particular about his books, Mr. Holmes. He knew the location of every single one of his thousands of volumes. To find them disarranged, let alone upside down, it is unheard of. Precisely, Holmes murmured, placing the Latin volume back in its correct orientation. Disorder, in a place of order, is often more revealing than chaos. Someone was in a hurry, perhaps, or unfamiliar with Mr. Blackwood's meticulous system. Or, more intriguingly, perhaps they intended to create a distraction. A subtle sign of an intruder that was meant to be dismissed as a mere oversight. He paused, then turned to the now silent butler, Giles, who had quietly re-entered the room with a tray bearing tea and biscuits, his face as inscrutable as ever. Giles, Holmes began, accepting a cup of tea but not touching it. You mentioned Mr. Blackwood spent much time in his study. Did he ever have visitors here, particularly late at night? Giles poured a cup for Mrs. Blackwood with steady hands. Occasionally, Sir Mr. Reginald Finch, his junior partner at the shop, would sometimes call in the evenings to discuss business, and on rare occasions, other gentlemen, collectors or academics, though Mr. Blackwood was a private man, for the most part, and on the evening of his demise, Holmes pressed, any such visitors? None that I recall, Sir Giles responded, his gaze unwavering. The house was secured as usual. I saw to it myself. Indeed. And Mr. Blackwood, was he prone to pacing? Perhaps, while deep in thought. Giles considered this for a moment. He did, sir. Often, especially when immersed in a difficult text, he would pace a particular circuit, from his desk, to the large globe in the corner, and then back by the door. By the door, the very spot where the infamous creaking floorboard lay. Holmes nodded slowly, a profound insight dawning in his eyes. He picked up the tiny amber shard from the penknife's tip, holding it up to the faint light. This amber, Giles, have you seen anything similar in the house? Perhaps an ornament, a cane handle, or a snuff-box? Giles, for the first time, showed a flicker of uncertainty. He looked around the room, then back at Holmes. I cannot say that I have, sir. Mr. Blackwood had many curious items, of course, but nothing comes immediately to mind. Holmes merely hummed, a low, thoughtful sound. He knew that the butler was either genuinely unaware or a master of but the amber, the peculiar scratches, the disarranged books, these were the silent witnesses, screaming their story to the only man capable of hearing them. The stage was set, and the players, both living and deceased, were beginning to reveal their roles. But who was the puppet master, pulling the strings of this macabre theatre? And how did a simple creak hold the secret to Mr. Blackwood's tragic end? The answers, I felt, were tantalizingly close, yet still shrouded in the deep, impenetrable fog of suspicion. Chapter 4. The Antiquarian's Secret. The following morning, the pervasive fog had lifted somewhat, though a grey, oppressive sky still hung over London, matching the sombre mood that had taken root within me since our visit to the Blackwood residence. After a hurried breakfast at Baker Street, during which Holmes consumed only a cup of strong black coffee, his mind evidently already miles ahead, he declared our next destination, Blackwood's Relics, Mr. Arthur Blackwood's antiquarian shop. "It is imperative, Watson," he explained, pacing our sitting room, a hand clasped behind his back, "that we understand the deceased's professional life, particularly his current preoccupations. Mrs. Blackwood's mention of a rare manuscript and secrets is too tantalizing to ignore. The silent floorboard points to a highly specific method, but the motive, my dear fellow, often lies in the victim's affairs." A short, handsome cab ride took us to a quieter street near the British Museum, where Blackwood's Relics occupied a discreet but impressive corner premises. The shop's exterior was a charming testament to its trade, with a faded gold leaf sign and a window display featuring an eclectic array of antique globes, ancient maps, and curious bronze figurines. Stepping inside was like entering a bygone era, the air thick with the scent of aged paper and polished wood. Shelves laden with books and glass display cases filled with artifacts stretched into the dim recesses of the shop. We were greeted by a young man, perhaps in his late 20s or early 30s, with a neatly trimmed beard and an earnest, slightly nervous demeanor. This, I surmised, was Mr. Reginald Finch, Mr. Blackwood's junior partner, the very man Giles had mentioned. Finch, upon learning of our purpose, expressed his condolences for Mr. Blackwood's passing with what seemed to be genuine sorrow, though I detected an undercurrent of something else, a subtle eagerness, perhaps beneath his composed exterior. "It is a terrible loss, gentlemen," Finch began, gesturing for us to step further into the shop. "Mr. Blackwood was not just my mentor, he was a true scholar, a man of unparalleled knowledge in the field of ancient texts. His passing leaves a void that cannot easily be filled." He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture that seemed almost to wipe away a bead of perspiration, despite the cool temperature of the shop. Holmes, ever direct, came straight to the point. "Mr. Finch, Mrs. Blackwood informed us that her late husband was working on a particularly sensitive project, a rare manuscript, in the days leading up to his death. Are you familiar with this endeavor?" Finch's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. "Ah, yes, the Blackwood Testament. He spoke of little else recently. It is a medieval text, a rather obscure work, believed to have originated from a monastic library in Wessex. Arthur, Mr. Blackwood, believed it held hidden codes, perhaps even a cipher leading to some lost treasure or a significant historical revelation. He was quite consumed by it." "Hidden codes, you say?" I interjected, a flicker of excitement igniting within me. This sounded like the very stuff of adventure. "Indeed, Dr. Watson," Finch confirmed, a note of almost fervent enthusiasm entering his voice. He spent countless hours deciphering its cryptic marginalia and unusual illustrations. He was convinced it was more than just a theological treatise. He had, in fact, been meeting with someone discreetly about it, though he never revealed the individual's identity to me. He said it was a matter of utmost delicacy and discretion. "Discretion," Holmes repeated, his voice devoid of emotion. "Pray tell, what kind of discretion would a scholarly pursuit require?" Finch shrugged, a nervous energy about him. "I can only speculate, Mr. Holmes. Perhaps it involved a potential buyer of enormous wealth who wished to remain anonymous, or perhaps the manuscript's contents were of a sensitive political or historical nature. Arthur was always very guarded when it came to his most prized discoveries." Holmes then turned his attention to the shop itself, his gaze sweeping over the dusty shelves and carefully arranged displays. He walked deliberately towards a large, heavy oak desk at the back, presumably Mr. Blackwood's personal workspace within the shop. On its surface lay an array of magnifiers, old quills, and a large, leather-bound blotter. Holmes, without asking permission, lifted the corner of the blotter. "And what is this, Mr. Finch?" Holmes asked, pointing with a long, lean finger to a peculiar stain on the absorbent paper. It was a faint, irregularly shaped mark, almost reddish-brown in color, but with an odd, almost greasy sheen to it. It was distinct from the surrounding inkblots and splashes. Finch peered at it, a frown creasing his brow. I'm not sure, Mr. Holmes. Perhaps some form of specialized ink Mr. Blackwood was experimenting with. He was often trying new methods for restoring and cleaning documents. Indeed, Holmes murmured, his eyes lingering on the stain for a moment longer than seemed necessary. He then carefully detached a small piece of the blotter, folding it and tucking it into a small envelope he produced from his pocket. A most unusual color for ink, would you not agree? And its texture, not quite what one would expect from a fluid. Finch watched him, a hint of unease now discernible beneath his composed exterior. I suppose not, sir, but Arthur had many peculiar compounds in his possession. Holmes merely nodded, his silence more unnerving than any interrogation. As we prepared to depart, Holmes cast one final, piercing look at Finch. Mr. Finch, I trust you will inform us if anything else regarding Mr. Blackwood's work, particularly the Blackwood Testament, comes to light. It could be of utmost importance. Finch, a little too quickly perhaps, assured Holmes he would. As we stepped back out into the cool London air, I reflected on the interview. Finch seemed concerned, yes, but also a little too eager to discuss the manuscript. A little too quick to dismiss the strange stain. Was it ambition, a desire to inherit Mr. Blackwood's legacy, or something more sinister? Holmes, I began, as our hansom started off. Do you believe Finch? My dear Watson, Holmes replied, his eyes distant, lost in thought. Belief is a luxury we cannot afford in our profession. We deal in facts, and the facts, in this instance, are piling up, slowly but a creaking floorboard, silenced, a peculiar fragment of amber, disarranged books, and now a Blackwood Testament, promising hidden secrets, and a most unusual stain on a desk blotter. Each piece, insignificant in isolation, but forming a mosaic of intrigue when viewed through the lens of deduction. The connection, however, still eludes us. But I have a strong suspicion that the truth lies somewhere between that silent floorboard and the secrets of that ancient manuscript. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. The stage was being set for a revelation, but what form would it take, and what further deceptions would we uncover before we reached the truth? Chapter 5. A puzzling conversation. Back at Baker Street, the familiar clutter of our sitting room felt, for once, like a sanctuary after the strained atmosphere of Blackwood's relics. Holmes immediately set about examining the small, carefully folded piece of blotter paper. He laid it flat on his analysis table, illuminating it with a powerful gas lamp. He then produced a series of tiny vials and reagents, his movements precise and economical, like a surgeon preparing for a delicate operation. This stain, Watson, he mused, without looking up, is the most intriguing aspect of our morning's visit. It is clearly not ordinary ink, nor, to my mind, any common household spill. Its unique texture and color suggest something more specialized. He dabbed a minute amount of a clear liquid onto the blotter, observing the reaction through his magnifying glass. No effervescence, not acidic, and the color does not fade, which rules out many organic dyes. He then applied another reagent, a reddish-brown fluid. This time, a faint, metallic sheen appeared where the two liquids met. Ah, interesting. A reaction with a heavy metal, I believe. Perhaps iron salts, but why would such a substance be present in an antiquarian's workshop? While Holmes delved into his chemical analysis, I, at his suggestion, immersed myself in the stacks of dusty tomes and recent newspapers he kept on hand. My task was to research cases of antiquarians or scholars who had died under suspicious circumstances, particularly those connected to rare manuscripts or hidden treasures. The annals of crime, I found, were replete with such tales, often involving betrayal, greed, and ruthless ambition. I noted several instances of poisoning, where the symptoms mimicked natural causes, a chilling parallel to Mr. Blackwood's sudden demise. Holmes, meanwhile, had shifted his focus to the amber fragment. He placed it under a powerful microscope, adjusting the focus with minute care. "The striations are quite distinctive, Watson," he announced, his voice carrying a note of quiet satisfaction. "This is not merely polished amber, but amber that has been shaped, perhaps by a lathe, and then subjected to considerable wear. The surface shows a peculiar pattern of abrasion, inconsistent with a simple ornament. It suggests prolonged contact with something rough, or repeated pressure." "So, not from a decorative item then?" I inquired, glancing up from my research. "Unlikely," Holmes affirmed. "More likely from a tool, or an instrument of some kind, perhaps a cane handle, or a part of a mechanical device. The specific shade and clarity suggest a Baltic origin and a certain age. It is not modern plastic, Watson, that much is certain. This fragment has seen many years, perhaps even centuries. My mind immediately jumped to the idea of a cane, an antique cane, perhaps one that Mr. Blackwood might have owned, or a visitor might have carried. A cane whose handle, made of polished amber, might have shed a tiny fragment when pressed against a resecured floorboard. The thought was chilling in its implication. Holmes, seemingly anticipating my train of thought, merely nodded. Indeed, a cane is a possibility, but a cane used not for support, but for something else. Something that would cause a fragment to dislodge under pressure at precisely that spot. We must consider every possibility. He then spread out a large-scale map of Belgravia on the floor, complete with architectural diagrams of typical Victorian townhouses. He knelt, his eyes tracing the outlines of properties, the placement of gardens, mews, and service entrances. Our Belgravia residence, Watson, is one of a row. Note the close proximity of the neighboring houses. The walls are thick, certainly, but sound does carry, particularly in the quiet of the night, and these properties often share common features, hidden passages, or access points, especially those constructed around the same period. He picked up a pencil and began to sketch rapidly on a notepad, detailing the internal structure of Mr. Blackwood's study, adding annotations and arrows. The creaking floorboard, Mrs. Blackwood's distress, the butler's curious omission. These elements, taken together, point to a single, overriding conclusion. The creak was not merely a nuisance, Watson, it was a signal, a warning, perhaps, or even a form of communication. A signal, I repeated, taken aback. But for whom, and why? Precisely the questions we must answer, Holmes replied, his eyes gleaming with intellectual hunger. If the floorboard habitually creaked when someone entered the study, and yet was silent when Mr. Blackwood was found dead, it strongly suggests that the mechanism for the creak was either deliberately disabled before the death, or that the person who entered did so in a manner that circumvented the creak. The former, given the effort put into resecuring the board, seems the more likely. Someone wanted to enter that study silently. Just then, he paused, his head cocked to one side, as if listening to an inaudible whisper. He snatched up a telegram form and scribbled a message with astonishing speed. "This, Watson," he announced, handing the form to me, "is to a colleague of mine, a specialist in medieval paleography. He may have some insight into obscure Wessex monastic texts and their hidden properties. And this," he indicated a specific phrase on the form, "is a coded query about a particular type of antique amber, known for its distinctive properties and its use in certain specialized instruments. I have a hunch, my dear fellow, that the creak was not merely a natural phenomenon, but something far more intricate, something mechanical, a mechanical creak." The idea was audacious, almost outlandish, yet coming from Holmes, it carried an unnerving ring of truth. The thought sent a shiver of mingled apprehension and excitement down my spine. We had moved beyond a simple murder and into the realm of an elaborate, calculated conspiracy. Who would devise such a cunning and subtle signal, and for what nefarious purpose? The suspense was almost unbearable, the anticipation of Holmes's next move now consuming my every thought. The reply to that telegram, I felt, would either confirm his wildest theories or send us down an entirely new, equally perilous path. Chapter 6. The Uninvited Guest. The telegram arrived late that afternoon, delivered by a breathless messenger boy. Holmes snatched it from Mrs. Hudson's hand with an unusual eagerness, his eyes scanning the terse message. A faint, knowing smile, one that often preceded a profound revelation, touched his lips. "Indeed, Watson," he declared, folding the telegram with deliberate precision and tucking it into his vest pocket. "My hunch proves correct. The amber fragment, as I suspected, is indeed from a particular type of antique carving known for its peculiar acoustical properties, and my paleographer confirms the Blackwood Testament is a legendary text, rumored to contain not just codes, but a unique system of sympathetic vibrations. This case, my dear fellow, is far more intricate than a simple opportunistic murder." I looked at him, baffled. Acoustical properties, sympathetic vibrations. Holmes, what precisely are you suggesting? "I am suggesting, Watson," he explained, pacing before the fireplace, "that the creaking floorboard was not a defect, but a deliberate mechanism, a highly ingenious one, I might add. The amber, with its unique resonance, would have been part of an instrument designed to produce a specific sound, amplified by the natural acoustics of the floorboard. Much like a sounding board on a musical instrument, the creak was an engineered signal, triggered when weight was applied to that particular spot. My jaw, I confess, dropped slightly. An engineered creak. The sheer audacity of such a device, hidden in plain sight for years, was staggering. But why, Holmes, why such an elaborate charade? To serve as a warning, Watson, or, perhaps, a form of communication. Imagine a scholar immersed in his work, oblivious to the world. A specific creak, one that only he truly noticed, would alert him to an approaching presence, a highly effective, if peculiar, burglar alarm, or perhaps a signal of a scheduled rendezvous. Holmes paused, his eyes gleaming, and the fact that it was silenced on the night of Mr. Blackwood's death points to only one conclusion. The killer knew of its existence, understood its function, and disabled it before committing the act. They wished to enter the study undetected. He then produced a small leather-bound notebook, flipping through its pages. My sources also indicate that the Blackwood Testament is tied to a rather unsavory rumor concerning a significant stash of medieval gold, believed to be hidden within the crypt of an ancient London church, long disused. The manuscript, so the rumor goes, contains the precise instructions for its retrieval. This adds a powerful motive, a far greater one than mere academic rivalry. Gold, I exclaimed, suddenly understanding the deeper stakes involved. Then Mr. Finch's eagerness for the manuscript takes on a more sinister light. Indeed, Holmes agreed, a thoughtful frown on his face. But let us not confine our suspicions to Mr. Finch alone. Greed has many faces, and this treasure, if it exists, would attract the most desperate of men. No, Watson, our work tonight is not yet done. I believe a return visit to the Blackwood residence is in order. But this time, we shall be the uninvited guests. He explained his plan, based on his deductions from the architectural diagrams. There was a rarely used side entrance, accessible through a narrow alleyway connecting to the mews behind the Blackwood property. This entrance, less visible from the street and the main house, would be the most likely point of ingress for someone wishing to enter the study undetected, especially if they knew the layout of the house. As dusk settled, painting the bruised sky in hues of purple and grey, Holmes and I found ourselves once more making our way to Belgravia, this time on foot. Our footsteps muffled by the gathering darkness, we positioned ourselves in the shadowy recesses of the narrow alley Holmes had indicated, the cold stone walls pressing in on us. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant clatter of a passing cab and the rhythmic drip of water from a leaky gutter. An hour passed, then another, the chill seeping into our bones. I was beginning to doubt Holmes's intuition, the logical certainty of his plan being tested by the tedious reality of a cold, still night. Just as I was about to suggest a retreat for a warming brandy, Holmes's hand shot out, clamping firmly onto my arm. His eyes, usually distant, were now sharp and focused, directed towards the obscured side entrance of the Blackwood house. A shadow, deeper than the surrounding gloom, detached itself from the wall. A figure, cloaked and hat-brimmed, moved with a furtive grace, unlocking the heavy and conspicuous door with a small metallic click that echoed unnaturally in the pervasive silence. The figure slipped inside, closing the door behind them with an almost inaudible thud. "Elementary, my dear Watson," Holmes whispered, his voice laced with grim satisfaction. "Our visitor has arrived, and if my deductions are correct, he is heading directly for Mr. Blackwood's study. The game, it seems, has just entered a new and much more dangerous phase." My heart hammered against my ribs. We were about to confront a nocturnal intruder, a man who, if Holmes's theories held true, might very well be Mr. Blackwood's killer, or at the very least, an accomplice in a scheme driven by greed and deceit. The thought sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. We had waited, we had watched, and now the trap was sprung. But who was this shadowy figure, and what would we find when we finally cornered them within the silent confines of that tragic study? The answer lay just beyond that heavy, new-closed door, promising a confrontation that would either unravel the mystery or plunge us deeper into its dangerous depths. Chapter 7. Midnight Intrusion. With a shared silent nod, Holmes and I moved from our hiding place, approaching the side entrance with practiced stealth. The air crackled with a palpable tension, our senses heightened by the knowledge that we were about to intercept a nocturnal trespasser. Holmes, ever prepared, produced a set of master keys from his coat pocket, a testament to his comprehensive network of informants and a reflection of the ease with which he navigated the legal and extra-legal spheres of London. With a soft click, the heavy oak door yielded. We slipped inside, the silence of the house pressing in on us. The faint scent of old paper and beeswax, which I had noticed upon our first visit, was now mingled with the faint, metallic temps of cold air from our entry. Holmes led the way, his steps light and noiseless, his silhouette barely discernible in the Stygian gloom of the unlit corridor. I followed closely, my service revolver gripped firmly in my hand, my heart thumping a steady rhythm against my ribs. We crept towards the study door, which was now ajar, a sliver of candlelight visible through the gap. Muffled sounds, the rustle of paper and the clink of metal, emanated from within. Holmes, with an almost imperceptible signal, pressed himself against the wall beside the door, motioning for me to do the same on the opposite side. He then flung the door open. The scene within was instantly illuminated by the flickering candlelight. A man, his back to us, was hunched over Mr. Blackwood's desk, frantically sifting through papers. He wore a dark, heavy coat, and a wide-brimmed hat obscured his features. Scattered around him on the desk were several tools, a small crowbar, a set of fine chisels, and a magnifying glass. As the door burst open, he started violently, spinning around, his hand instinctively reaching for something in his coat pocket. "Hold there." Holmes's voice, sharp and commanding, echoed through the study. "Do not move, or Dr. Watson will be compelled to act." The man froze, his eyes, wide with surprise and fear, darting between Holmes and my levelled revolver. He was a man of medium height, with a wiry build and a thin, avaricious face, his features now illuminated by the trembling candlelight. He was certainly not Mr. Reginald Finch. Who are you?" he stammered, his voice hoarse, his hand still hovering over his pocket. "We are merely guests, sir, come to inquire about your late-night perambulations," Holmes replied, stepping further into the room, his eyes sweeping over the desk and the tools. "Perhaps you would care to explain why you are here, rummaging through the possessions of a deceased gentleman." The man, seeing the futility of resistance, slowly raised his hands. "There's no need for that, gentlemen. I meant no harm. My name is Silas Croft. I'm a professional associate of Mr. Blackwood's. I came for what was rightfully mine, rightfully yours." Holmes scoffed, picking up the small crowbar from the desk. "These do not appear to be the tools of a scholarly exchange. Mr. Croft." Croft visibly gulped, his eyes shifting nervously towards the door. I know what this looks like, but I swear on my mother's grave, I had nothing to do with Arthur's death. I just came to retrieve a particular item, a valuable one, promised to me by Mr. Blackwood himself, but which he had delayed in delivering." "And what item might that be, Mr. Croft?" I pressed, my fingers still on the trigger guard. Croft hesitated, then blurted out, "It's a small, jeweled reliquary. He was restoring it for me. It contains a fragment of a very old Saxon artifact. He promised it to me by yesterday, but then he died, and I feared the widow would simply keep it, or sell it off to the highest bidder." He gestured wildly around the room. "I knew of this entrance, you see, because Arthur himself showed it to me. We often conducted discreet transactions away from prying eyes." Holmes's eyes narrowed. "Discreet transactions, Mr. Croft? Are you, by any chance, a fence of stolen artifacts?" Croft blanched, but remained silent, his guilt evident. Holmes, ever perceptive, did not press the point. "And the Blackwood Testament, Mr. Croft? Are you familiar with it?" Croft's eyes lit up with a sudden, avaricious glint. "Ah, the Testament. Yes, Arthur spoke of it often. He was obsessed. He believed it held the key to a vast fortune, a cache of medieval gold hidden away in an old, forgotten London church crypt. He was convinced he was on the verge of deciphering the final clue. I offered to help him, of course, for a share, but he was stubborn, always insisting he had to do it alone." "So, you believe Mr. Blackwood was murdered for this treasure?" I asked, lowering my revolver slightly. "It's the only explanation," Croft exclaimed, seeing a flicker of understanding in our faces. "Arthur was close. I know he was. He found some sort of diagram, he said, hidden in the manuscript's binding. Something about a specific church in the East End, one believed to be long disused or even demolished." Holmes slowly retrieved a small envelope containing the piece of blotter paper from his pocket, holding it up. "And this, Mr. Croft, have you seen this substance before?" a reddish-brown, somewhat oily residue. Croft squinted at it in the candlelight. "No, can't say I have. Arthur worked with all sorts of strange concoctions, though restoring old documents can be a messy business." Holmes merely nodded, his gaze distant, his mind clearly sifting through the new information. Silas Croft, a known fence, confirming the rumor of a hidden treasure and a specific church, along with a secret entrance. This certainly added a layer of motive, but it didn't quite fit with the silent floorboard. Croft, if he was truly just retrieving a reliquary, would have no reason to disable the creak, and his tools were for breaking into the house, not for fixing floorboards. "Very well, Mr. Croft," Holmes said, his voice thoughtful. "We shall take you into custody, but I assure you, your claim of innocence in Mr. Blackwood's death will be thoroughly investigated." As I moved to apprehend Croft, who offered no further resistance, Holmes's eyes swept once more over the study, lingering on the now fixed floorboard, the amber fragment, the careful procuring, the engineered creak. These elements still pointed to a premeditated act, a deeper betrayal. Croft was a thief, yes, and greedy, but Holmes's expression told me that he was merely a secondary player, an unwitting cog in a far more elaborate machine of deceit. The real culprit, the individual who had painstakingly silenced the warning of the creaking floorboard, was still at large, and the true motive for Arthur Blackwood's death remained tantalizingly out of reach. But with each new piece of the puzzle, Holmes's path became clearer, leading him closer to the mechanical whisper that held the secret. Chapter 8. The Mechanical Whisper. Silas Croft, despite his protestations of innocence in the murder, was handed over to the waiting constables, his furtive nighttime expedition ending ignominiously in a police cell. Holmes, however, showed little interest in the fate of the fence. His mind, I observed, was already far beyond the petty thievery of a reliquary, fixated instead on the profounder intricacies of Mr. Blackwood's death. "Croft is merely a scavenger, Watson," Holmes declared, as we stood once more in the study, the first tentative rays of dawn now filtering through the heavy curtains. "He provides us with corroboration for the treasure rumor, but he is not our man. His methods, crude and direct, do not align with the subtle, meticulous silencing of the floorboard. No, our killer is a craftsman, a planner, one intimately familiar with the house and Mr. Blackwood's habits." He moved directly to the infamous floorboard, his gaze now imbued with a renewed sense of purpose. He produced a small, polished wooden case from his pocket, which contained an array of specialist tools, fine probes, a watchmaker's loop, and a miniature set of screwdrivers. He knelt, his silhouette sharp against the growing light, and began his most detailed examination yet. "Observe, Watson," he instructed, his voice low, as he carefully scraped away a thin layer of wax and polish from the edges of the board. "The surface is immaculate, a testament to the care taken in its resectoring. The screws, though recently disturbed, are now flush with the wood, perfectly aligned. A professional job, indeed, but too perfect, perhaps." He then applied a minute drop of a volatile chemical to the joint between the floorboard and its neighbor. A faint, almost imperceptible line appeared, indicating a minute gap. Holmes peered into this gap with his powerful loop. "Here, Watson," he finally stated, a note of quiet triumph in his voice. "Just as I suspected, a pinhole, drilled, with exquisite precision, barely a millimeter in diameter, leading not into the subfloor, but diagonally into the wall itself, adjacent to the board. It has been cleverly plugged with a tiny dowel of wood, dyed to match the floor, but the workmanship is too clean, too deliberate, to be accidental." My heart skipped a beat. A pinhole leading into the wall. This was no ordinary floorboard. It was part of a far more complex apparatus. A mechanism, Holmes. "Precisely," he confirmed, his eyes alight with intellectual fire. "The amber shard, the acoustical properties of the wood, the location, it all points to a carefully constructed system. The creak was not merely the sound of wood on wood. It was a mechanical whisper asterisk. The pinhole, I surmise, housed a thin wire or rod, which, when triggered, would cause the amber to vibrate against the floorboard's underside, creating that distinctive creaking sound. A sophisticated early warning system, perhaps, or a device for subtle communication, known only to a select few." He ran a gloved hand along the wall beside the floorboard, his fingers brushing against the dark oak paneling. The device itself would have been hidden within the wall, activated either remotely or by a simple pressure plate beneath the floorboard. When the killer entered, they would have known precisely how to disarm it, perhaps by simply withdrawing the wire, thus silencing the creak that would have alerted Mr. Blackwood. The resecuring of the board was merely to conceal this disarming, to make it appear as a natural, if fortunate, cessation of a nuisance. The sheer ingenuity, the cold-blooded calculation required to conceive and execute such a plan, sent a shiver down my spine. This was not a crime of passion or opportunity. It was a carefully orchestrated act, months, perhaps even years, in the making. But who, Holmes? I asked, the name of Reginald Finch springing to mind once more. Who would have the technical skill, the detailed knowledge of the house, and the motive to construct such a device? Holmes rose, his eyes distant, now, encompassing the entire room, as if seeing through its physical structures to the hidden machinations beneath. The technical skill points to someone with a keen, analytical mind, perhaps even an inventor or an engineer. The detailed knowledge of the house points to an intimate connection, someone who spent considerable time here. And the motive, Dr. Watson, points to something of profound value, the Blackwood Testament, and the treasure it supposedly reveals. He walked over to the desk, once again examining the blotter, the piece of which was now being chemically analyzed at our Baker Street laboratory, and the reddish-brown stain. Watson, my preliminary analysis suggests it is a compound, a very specific one, used in the meticulous cleaning and restoration of ancient manuscripts. A powerful solvent, capable of dissolving stubborn age, grime, and even traces of ancient inks or protective layers, revealing what lies beneath. A substance not commonly found, even in an antiquarian's workshop, but perhaps only in one highly specialized for such restoration. His eyes suddenly blazed with a fierce intelligence, as if all the disparate threads of the case, the silent creak, the amber, the disarranged books, the secret manuscript, the unique stain had coalesced into a single, undeniable picture. "Watson," he stated, his voice low and firm, "the pieces are all in place. The silent floorboard, the mechanical whisper, was not just a means of entry. It was a confession in plain sight. It tells us not only how Mr. Blackwood was silenced, but also who was intimately involved in his final hours, and why. He turned towards the door, a grim determination in his features. "The time for speculation is over, my dear fellow. It is time for a confrontation. Our killer, I believe, is far closer than we initially imagined, and the evidence, though subtle, is now irrefutable." We returned to Blackwood's relics. "I have a rather pressing question for Mr. Reginald Finch." My blood ran cold. Finch, the nervous junior partner, so eager to discuss the manuscript, so quick to dismiss the stain. Could he truly be the cunning, cold-blooded architect of such an intricate murder? The thought was chilling, yet Holmes's conviction left no room for doubt. The dramatic climax, the unmasking of the killer, was now upon us, and I knew it would be a scene etched forever in the annals of crime. The mechanical whisper, designed for years to alert, had at last revealed its deadly secret. Chapter 9. The Web Unravels. The handsome cab ride back to Blackwood's relics was conducted in a silence more profound than any I had ever shared with Holmes. His features were set in a grim, unyielding mask, his eyes distant yet intensely focused, as if he were replaying the entire sequence of events in his formidable mind. I, for my part, felt a mixture of trepidation and anticipation. Holmes's pronouncements, once given, were rarely wrong, and the prospect of confronting a murderer, particularly one so cunning and calculating, sent a shiver through me. Upon our arrival, we found Mr. Reginald Finch arranging a display of ancient coins, his back to the door. He turned, a polite smile on his face, which quickly faltered as he saw the grim determination in Holmes's eyes. "Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, a pleasure to see you again, though I confess I had hoped for a more tranquil day." His voice was a shade too jovial, too forced. "Tranquility, Mr. Finch, is often the first casualty in the pursuit of truth," Holmes stated, his voice a low, resonant tone that brooked no argument. He stepped further into the shop, his gaze sweeping around, not at the artifacts, but at the man before him. "We have come to discuss Mr. Blackwood's death, Mr. Finch, and specifically, the curious case of the creaking floorboard." Finch's smile vanished completely. His eyes darted nervously. The floorboard. I understood the police had concluded it was a heart attack. The floorboard is merely an old house's quirk, is it not? A quirk, Mr. Finch, Holmes countered, stepping closer, his voice laced with steel. That was, in fact, an ingenious warning system, a mechanical whisper, if you will, triggered by an intricate device hidden beneath the floor and within the wall, designed to alert Mr. Blackwood to any unscheduled entry into his study. A system known, I believe, only to a select few, perhaps even designed by one of those individuals. Finch's face went pale. He stammered, I have no knowledge of such a device. Arthur never spoke of it. Indeed, Holmes challenged, his eyes boring into Finch. Then perhaps you can explain this. He produced the small amber shard from his pocket, holding it up between his thumb and forefinger. A fragment of polished Baltic amber, from a distinctive antique cane. Mr. Finch, a cane, I believe, precisely like the one you often carry. Finch instinctively looked down at his own hand, which clutched a slender, antique cane, its handle a beautiful piece of carved amber. The sudden, telltale movement confirmed Holmes's suspicion. A small, almost invisible chip was missing from the base of the handle. Finch's face drained of all color. When you disarmed the device, Mr. Finch, removing the wire from the pinhole in the wall adjacent to the floorboard, you pressed down on the floorboard to access the mechanism. Your antique cane, used for leverage, shed this tiny fragment, a subtle but fatal error. Would you not agree? You fixed the floorboard, believing you had erased all traces, but you forgot the amber and the faint, almost invisible pinhole in the wall where the warning system was activated. Finch stumbled backwards, bumping into a display cabinet, sending a delicate ceramic vase wobbling. This is madness. You have no proof. I was not even at the house that night. Oh, but you were, Mr. Finch, Holmes asserted, his voice now rising in intensity. And the motive is clear. The Blackwood Testament and the promise of the medieval gold it contains. You knew Mr. Blackwood was close to deciphering the final clue. You wished to acquire that secret for yourself. He then produced the small, chemically treated piece of blotter paper from his other pocket. And this, Mr. Finch, the unique reddish-brown stain, which you dismissed as merely some form of specialized ink. My laboratory analysis confirms it is a highly specialized chemical compound, a powerful solvent used exclusively in the delicate restoration of ancient manuscripts, capable of revealing hidden layers of text. A substance, I might add, that is extremely rare and only found in premises as specialized as Blackwood's relics, where Mr. Blackwood himself kept a supply for his most intricate work. You used it to reveal the final clue, did you not? Perhaps even tried it on the manuscript the night you murdered him. Finch's eyes darted frantically, like a trapped animal. I was merely examining the manuscript after his death, to see what he had found. I had no part in his murder. No part. Mr. Finch, Holmes scoffed, advancing towards the cornered man. You silenced the board, ensuring Mr. Blackwood would not know you were there. You then administered a fast-acting poison, one that perfectly mimicked the symptoms of a heart attack, leaving no trace in a standard post-mortem examination. I have learned from my sources that a particular, rare cardiac glycoside, derived from the foxglove plant, can achieve precisely this effect, undetectable without highly specific, targeted tests. You are an antiquarian, Mr. Finch, but also a connoisseur of ancient poisons, perhaps for their historical significance, or, in this case, for their lethal efficiency. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Finch, driven by avarice, had planned every detail, from the silencing of the creek to the carefully chosen poison, all to inherit the secrets of the Blackwood Testament. His seemingly innocent distress, his eager discussion of the manuscript, it was all a carefully constructed facade. Finch, defeated, slumped against the counter, his face ashen. He knew he was caught. The silent floorboard, which he believed had sealed his crime, had, in Holmes's hands, become the very instrument of his undoing. Why the creek, Finch? Holmes pressed, his voice now devoid of any emotion, purely analytical. Why such an elaborate device, rather than a simpler method of entry? Finch, in a voice barely above a whisper, finally cracked. Arthur, he always used it. From when I was a boy, he told me it was our secret signal, for when I needed to speak with him late at night and he was deep in his studies. A game, he said. A game. I designed the mechanism for him, improved it over the years. He trusted me implicitly. He would have never expected it to be turned against him. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. The irony, his own little device, used to silence him forever. My stomach churned. The very symbol of their twisted, secret bond, a childhood game, had become the instrument of his mentor's death. The audacity, the chilling premeditation of it all, was truly horrifying. The silent floorboard had spoken, and its tale was one of profound betrayal and cold, calculated murder. Chapter 10. The Unmasking and the Epilogue. The confession, uttered in a choked whisper by Reginald Finch, hung in the air of the antiquarian shop, thick and heavy with the weight of its sinister truth. Holmes, ever the master of dramatic effect, had laid bare the entire, chilling narrative, piece by painstakingly deduced piece. The creaking floorboard, a nostalgic sound for years, had indeed been a mechanical whisper, a deadly signal orchestrated by the very man who once shared a twisted childhood game with his victim. Indeed, Mr. Finch, Holmes concluded, his voice ringing with authority, the mechanism you designed for Mr. Blackwood, a symbol of your shared trust, became your most potent weapon. You silenced it on that fateful night, believing you could erase your presence. But the minute amber fragment, a piece of your very own antique cane, dislodged and wedged in the newly resecured board, remained as an irrefutable testament to your intimate involvement. The pinhole in the wall, evidence of the device's sophisticated nature, further implicated you. The specialized solvent, a rare chemical used solely for the delicate task of unveiling hidden texts, and found only here, established your deep engagement with the manuscript and your motive. He produced a small, airtight phial from his pocket, containing a faint residue, and this, Mr. Finch, is the final, damning piece of evidence. Traces of a cardiac glycoside, a potent, fast-acting poison, derived from the foxglove, which perfectly simulates the symptoms of a heart attack. You, a scholar of ancient texts, would naturally possess knowledge of such historical poisons, perhaps even collecting them as curiosities. You administered it, knowing it would be virtually undetectable in a routine autopsy, thereby ensuring Mr. Blackwood's death would be ruled a natural one, leaving you free to decipher the remaining clues of the Blackwood Testament, and claim the fabled treasure for yourself. Finch, now a broken man, could only stare blankly, his once eager eyes devoid of all life. He offered no further resistance, as Holmes calmly summoned a nearby constable, who arrived promptly. Having been alerted by a discreet signal Holmes had given me moments before the confrontation, Finch was led away, his antique amber cane now a cold, ironic symbol of his downfall. As the police van rumbled away, carrying the no-confessed murderer, the quiet of the shop returned, but it was a quiet now imbued with the echoes of betrayal and greed. I looked at Holmes, my admiration for his prodigious intellect soaring to new heights. "Holmes," I said, my voice filled with awe, "your deductions were truly magnificent. To piece together such a complex web of deceit from a mere creaking floorboard, it is beyond comprehension." He merely nodded, a flicker of his characteristic satisfaction in his eyes. "The simplest details, Watson, are often the most profound. Human nature, in its complexities, rarely deviates from fundamental motives, and the pursuit of wealth, particularly hidden wealth, has driven men to commit the most heinous of crimes since time immemorial. Finch's cleverness was his undoing. He left too many subtle traces, believing them too insignificant to be noticed. The silent floorboard was his intended triumph, but it became his ultimate confession. We stepped out into the bustling London street, the early morning sun now piercing through the remaining vestiges of the fog, casting long, dramatic shadows. The city, oblivious to the dark drama that had unfolded within its walls, hummed with its usual relentless energy. "And the Blackwood Testament, Holmes?" I asked. "The medieval gold?" Holmes gave a slight shrug. "The manuscript, Watson, is now secured. The truth of the alleged treasure it contains remains to be verified. Such ancient rumors often hold more folklore than fact, but even if the gold exists, it will now be a matter for the authorities, and no longer a motive for murder." As we made our way back to Baker Street, I reflected on the case. It was a testament to the fact that even in the most seemingly mundane aspects of life, beneath the surface of everyday routine, lay depths of human depravity and ingenuity. The silent floorboard, once a mere irritation, had revealed itself to be the key to a meticulously planned murder. A chilling reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that the most subtle of clues can, in the hands of a genius like Sherlock Holmes, unravel the most intricate of crimes. And so, my dear friends, concludes this particular chronicle of Mr. Sherlock Holmes's remarkable abilities. I trust that the intricacies of this case, where a mere creak held the secret to a life and a fortune, have provided you with a glimpse into the thrilling world of deduction and mystery. The gaslit streets of London hold countless such tales, and I assure you, there are many more to come. Thank you for joining me on this journey